The sound of distant jet engines always made Emily Carter look up. In her small Midwestern hometown of Rock Falls, Illinois, the sky was a constant theater of motion birds gliding, clouds drifting, and sometimes, if she was lucky, the thunderous roar of military jets tearing across the horizon. Each time she heard that sound, her heart beat a little faster. For her, it wasn't just noise, it was a call. Her father, Henry Carter, was a Vietnam veteran. Every Memorial Day, she'd watch him unfold the American flag with slow, deliberate care, as if every star on it held a memory of someone he once knew. He never spoke much about the war, but there was a quiet reverence in his movements, a respect that needed no words. Emily absorbed that silence as a child. It was the language of strength. When she was 12, she asked him what it felt like to fly. Henry smiled faintly. "I didn't fly, kiddo. I was on the ground most of the time. But the ones who did, they said it felt like freedom." Freedom. That word stayed with her. Through middle school and high school, Emily wasn't the loud or popular type. She wasn't the cheerleader or the class clown. She was the girl who sat by the window during lunch, sketching aircraft designs on napkins or reading biographies of aviators like Amelia Earhart and the first women Navy pilots. While her friends dreamed of becoming influencers or heading to big city colleges, Emily dreamed of wearing a flight suit with her name stitched above the heart. But small towns can be cruel to big dreams. When she told her guidance counselor she wanted to apply to the U.S. Naval Academy, the woman blinked twice before responding. "Emily, that's a very competitive path. Maybe you should think about aeronautical engineering instead. Something less intense." Emily smiled politely, but inside she made a decision. She would not let others define what was possible for her. At dinner that night, she told her father. He looked at her for a long moment, the flicker of the kitchen light reflecting in his eyes. "Are you sure?" he asked. "Yes," she said without hesitation. "I want to fly. I want to serve." He nodded slowly. "Then you'd better be ready to fight twice as hard as anyone else." The following months became a storm of preparation. She ran every morning before school, her shoes slapping against the empty roads as the sunrise painted the sky orange. She studied harder than ever, memorizing physics equations, practicing essays, and acing every interview. When rejection letters arrived from other programs, she didn't flinch. She pinned them to her wall as reminders each no was just one step closer to her yes. Finally, one cold March morning, a thick envelope from Annapolis arrived. Her hands trembled as she tore it open. The words at the top read, "Congratulations. You have been appointed to the United States Naval Academy." Her father stood silently beside her. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Then he placed his hand on her shoulder. "You earned this," he said. "Don't let anyone make you forget it." The academy was another world. From the moment Emily stepped off the bus at Annapolis, she felt the weight of expectation. The air smelled of salt and discipline. Shouts from upperclassmen echoed through the courtyard. The first weeks were a blur of physical exhaustion, shouted orders, and endless drills. Cadets who came in confident were often broken by the sheer intensity of the place. Emily struggled, but she never gave up. During flight physics lectures, she stayed late to understand every concept. During training runs, she pushed herself even when her legs screamed for rest. She learned to disassemble her rifle blindfolded, recite aircraft specs under pressure, and march in perfect synchronization. The first time she completed a 10-mile run without falling behind, she almost cried, not from pain, but from pride. But not everyone was welcoming. Some of the male cadets treated her presence like a novelty. Carter once sneered during a break, "You really think they'll put a girl in a cockpit before the guys?" "Be real." Emily looked him straight in the eye. "They'll put whoever's best," she said simply. And I plan to be that. Over time, that attitude earned her quiet respect and a few enemies. But she didn't care. She wasn't there to make friends. She was there to fly. Her first glimpse of the flight simulators was unforgettable. Rows of sleek, humming machines filled the room like futuristic beasts waiting to be tamed. When she sat inside one, gripping the controls, the world outside ceased to exist. She was weightless, focused, alive. Her instructor, Lieutenant Mark Reeves, was a veteran pilot known for being tough. His eyes were like radar sharp, scanning for weakness. He never smiled, never offered easy praise. "You want to be a pilot, Carter?" he said on her first day. "Then earn it. I don't care if you're male, female, or Martian up there. Gravity doesn't care what you are." That challenge fueled her. Day after day, Emily practiced in the simulator, enduring G-force drills, takeoff sequences, and emergency scenarios. She made mistakes, plenty of them, but she learned from each one. Reeves watched her closely, and though he rarely spoke, he began to notice something different about her. She didn't panic. Even when alarms blared and the simulated aircraft began to spiral, Emily's voice stayed calm, her movements precise. Then came the real test, the solo flight evaluation. The morning air was cold as she stepped onto the runway, the sun glinting off her helmet. Her heart raced, but her face betrayed nothing. She climbed into the cockpit of the T-6 Texan II, her hands steady on the controls. Reeves' voice crackled over the radio. "Carter, you have clearance. Let's see what you've got." The plane accelerated down the runway, and for the first time, she felt real power under her command. As the wheels lifted from the ground, a surge of emotion filled her chest. The horizon stretched endlessly before her, blue, infinite, alive. But halfway through her flight, a warning light flashed, hydraulic pressure low. Her breath caught. The controls grew heavy. Most trainees would have panicked, but not Emily. She radioed in calmly. "Control, this is Carter. Hydraulic pressure's dropping. Initiating emergency landing protocol." On the ground, Reeves listened, expecting chaos. But her voice remained smooth as silk. Every maneuver she made was textbook perfect. Minutes later, the plane touched down with a soft screech, perfectly aligned. When she climbed out, her legs trembled, but her face was composed. Reeves approached, helmet tucked under his arm, shaking his head slightly. "You didn't panic," he said. She smiled faintly. "That's what you trained me for, sir." For the first time, he smiled back. "Welcome to the sky, Lieutenant Carter." That night, Emily stood alone by the runway. The stars shimmered above her, the faint hum of distant aircraft filling the air. She thought of her father, of every doubt, every sneer, every "you can't." She had faced them all, and here she was. She ran her fingers over the wings of gold pinned to her chest. They gleamed softly under the moonlight, a promise and a challenge all at once. She whispered to herself, voice steady as the wind, "One day, I'll be the one they call when things go wrong. I'll be ready." The night answered with the echo of engines far away, as if the sky itself had heard her vow. And for the first time, Emily Carter didn't just dream of flying. She belonged to the sky. The Florida sun was merciless. By the time Emily Carter arrived at Naval Air Station Pensacola, she was drenched in sweat before dawn even broke. The base smelled of fuel, salt, and metal, an intoxicating scent for someone who had dreamed of this moment her entire life. This was where pilots were made. Or broken. Standing in formation among dozens of trainees, Emily could feel the weight of eyes on her. There were only 3 women in the class, and the stares weren't hostile but skeptical. Each of them was about to be pushed to their limits. "Flight school isn't for dreamers," the commanding officer barked. "It's for those who can handle the sky when it wants to kill you." Emily's pulse steadied. She could handle it. From the very beginning, the schedule was punishing. Wake up at 0400, physical conditioning at 0500, simulators by 0700, flight theory, mechanical systems, and aerodynamics until late night. The first week alone left her exhausted beyond reason. Her bunkmate, Cadet Janelle Ortiz, often collapsed onto her bed after curfew, whispering, "How do you stay so calm, Carter? I swear, I'm gonna melt before we even fly." Emily just smiled. You keep your head steady. That's all that matters. But deep down, she was struggling too. Every muscle in her body ached, and the instructors seemed to test her more than the others. During runs, one would deliberately pace behind her, waiting for her to slow. She never did. During lectures, another would suddenly call on her to solve complex equations mid-class. She always answered. Her calm irritated some and impressed others. But it never wavered. Her primary flight instructor was Lieutenant Mark Reeves, the same sharp-eyed man who had overseen her simulator training back at Annapolis. Here, though, he was tougher, colder, and far less forgiving. "Carter," he said on her first day, flipping through her file, "I remember you. You're steady, but let's see if you can stay that way when you're 30,000 feet up and everything goes wrong." She met his eyes, unflinching. "Yes, sir?" Reeves smirked slightly. "Let's find out." Her first real flight was both exhilarating and terrifying. The T-6 Texan II roared down the runway, lifting into an endless expanse of blue. Emily gripped the controls tightly, her headset buzzing with instructions. "Maintain heading 210, Reeves ordered from the rear cockpit. "Yes, sir." "Altitude 5,000 feet. Don't fight the turbulence. Flow with it." The aircraft bounced violently in the crosswinds. Sweat trickled down her temple, but her hands remained steady. She adjusted, corrected, breathed. Reeves' voice softened for the first time. "Good. Remember, Carter, the sky doesn't care how strong you are. It cares how calm you stay." In the weeks that followed, Emily learned that flying wasn't about power. It was about trust. Trusting the aircraft. Trusting the air. Trusting herself. Each day brought a new challenge. Instrument flying, emergency procedures, barrel rolls, stall recoveries. Every lesson tested her focus. Every mistake could mean death in a real mission. Some nights, she'd sit by the edge of the airfield after everyone else had gone, watching jets take off into the dusk. Their engines painted streaks of fire across the sky. That sight reminded her why she endured the pain, the fatigue, the doubt. It wasn't glory she chased, it was purpose. Still, doubt had a way of creeping in. One afternoon, during a high-speed maneuver test, her aircraft's navigation system malfunctioned mid-flight. Panic surged in her chest as the instruments blinked erratically. The horizon spun in front of her. "Carter, what's your status?" Reeves demanded through the radio. She took a breath. Minor system failure. Stabilizing. Her heart pounded, but her hands moved with machine-like precision rebooting circuits, recalibrating altitude, checking her flight path manually. On the ground, the control tower held its breath. After several tense minutes, her voice came back. System stabilized. Returning to base. When she landed, Reeves met her with that same unreadable stare. "You just handled a malfunction that's grounded veterans," he said. "Nice work." Emily exhaled. "Thank you, sir." He nodded once. "Don't thank me. Do it again tomorrow." But not every day was victory. 2 weeks later, during formation flying drills, another cadet misjudged his spacing. The wingtip of his plane clipped Emily's tail section, forcing her into a violent spin. The world blurred. Her alarm screamed. Reeves' voice shouted in her headset. "Eject! Eject! But Emily refused to give up control. Her training kicked in. She cut throttle, counter-rolled, adjusted pitch. Every move was instinct, not fear. Seconds felt like hours. When she finally pulled the plane out of its death spiral, the entire base had gone silent. Reeves stormed onto the runway as she taxied back, his face red with fury. "Why the hell didn't you eject?" he shouted. She stepped down, unfastened her helmet, and looked him dead in the eye. "Because I could still fly, sir." There was silence. Then, slowly, Reeves nodded. "Remind me never to underestimate you again." By the time the first major evaluation came around, Emily had built a reputation, half admiration, half disbelief. The Iron Calm, some called her. She was never the loudest, never the strongest, but she was always composed. When others cracked under pressure, Emily stayed cool. On the morning of her final assessment, clouds hung low and gray. A storm loomed offshore. The instructors debated delaying flights, but Reeves decided otherwise. "Real pilots don't wait for perfect weather," he said. "Carter, you're up first." She nodded and strapped into her aircraft. As the rain began to fall, visibility dropped to near zero. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Most cadets would have begged to postpone. Emily simply radioed, "Lieutenant Carter, ready for takeoff." The flight was brutal. Wind buffeted her wings. Lightning flashed across her canopy. Every instinct screamed to turn back. But she stayed steady, following instruments and intuition. When she finally broke through the storm clouds into open sky, the world below glowed in golden light. It was breathtaking. On her descent, the runway shimmered with rain. Her landing was smooth, controlled, perfect. As she climbed out, drenched but grinning, Reeves was waiting. "You're either fearless or insane," he said. Emily wiped rain from her visor. "Just prepared, sir." For the first time, he laughed. "I'll take that." That evening, the base held a small ceremony. One by one, new pilots were called to receive their wings of gold, symbols of mastery, courage, and belonging. When Reeves pinned hers on, he leaned close and said quietly, "You didn't just pass flight school, Carter. You changed what everyone thought possible." Her heart swelled not from pride, but from the quiet realization that she had earned every ounce of it. Later, standing alone on the runway as the sun set, she could see her reflection in her jet's polished surface. The same girl who once drew airplanes on napkins now stood as a U.S. Navy aviator. The air was heavy with humidity and promise. She thought of her father back home, probably telling the neighbors his daughter was now a pilot. She smiled at the thought. The wind carried the distant sound of another jet taking off, a reminder that this was only the beginning. Emily whispered to herself, "The sky tested me, and I'm still here." The horizon glowed pink and orange, and she knew that one day soon she'd face storms far worse than rain and thunder. But she also knew something else. When that moment came, she wouldn't flinch, because she was born for this. The USS Ronald Reagan loomed like a floating city in the endless blue of the Pacific. From the flight deck, the ocean stretched to infinity, an expanse both liberating and humbling. For Lieutenant Emily Carter, stepping onto that deck for the first time was a moment she'd dreamed of since childhood. But reality, she soon learned, wasn't as welcoming as her dreams. As the youngest and one of the few female combat aviators aboard, she immediately drew attention. Conversations would pause when she walked by. Some glances were curious, others skeptical. The unspoken question lingered everywhere. Could she really handle combat? Emily didn't answer with words. She let her flying speak for her. The carrier's routine was grueling. Every day began before dawn, when the flight deck came alive with roaring engines, flashing lights, and the scent of jet fuel. The noise was deafening, the pace unforgiving. Mistakes weren't just dangerous, they were fatal. Emily threw herself into it, perfecting carrier takeoffs and landings, one of the hardest skills in aviation. The first few times, her heart pounded as the catapult launched her jet forward like a bullet. The sudden jolt, the blur of horizon, the split second between sea and sky, it all fused into an adrenaline-fueled symphony. Landing, however, was another story. Her first attempt nearly ended in disaster. She came in too high too fast. The arresting cable missed her tailhook, and the plane shot forward, heartbeats away from the end of the deck. Wave off. The landing signal officer yelled, and she gunned the throttle, barely escaping a crash into the sea. When she landed safely on the next pass, no one cheered. No one needed to. Failure was part of the process. But Emily refused to let that near miss define her. That night, she stayed on the deck long after others had gone below. The carrier lights shimmered on the waves as she replayed every second in her mind. A hand tapped her shoulder. It was Lieutenant Mark Reeves. "Rough day," he said. She nodded. "I'll get it right tomorrow." He smiled faintly. "I know you will." That's what separates pilots from passengers. Over the next few weeks, Emily's skills sharpened like a blade. Her landings became textbook perfect. Her refueling maneuvers graceful. Her formation flying flawless. Slowly, the skeptical looks began to fade. But respect in the Navy wasn't given easily, and for some, it wasn't given at all. During a debrief one afternoon, Commander Douglas, a grizzled veteran, questioned her performance. "You're precise, Carter, but you play it safe," he said. "Combat doesn't reward caution. You think too much." Emily met his gaze calmly. "Sir, I think just enough to bring my jet and my team home." The room went silent. Douglas's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing. After that, no one questioned her judgment again. Then came the night exercise that changed everything. The sky was moonless, the sea invisible in the darkness. The mission was a joint simulation with a Navy SEAL team aboard. Their leader was Captain Ryan Hawley, a man whose reputation preceded him. Decorated, disciplined, and fiercely respected, he was the kind of officer people spoke of in low tones. Emily didn't know him yet, but she would soon. The drill was simple: provide air cover for the SEALs' simulated coastal extraction. But nature had other plans. A storm rolled in suddenly, fierce and unpredictable. Waves towered, winds howled, and radio signals began to fail. Half the air group was grounded. Emily's jet was one of the few cleared to launch. "Carter, you don't have to take this flight," Reeves said quietly. "Visibility's garbage, lightning everywhere. No one would blame you." Emily adjusted her helmet, her expression steady. "Then who's watching their backs, sir?" Minutes later, her FA-18 Super Hornet catapulted off the deck, vanishing into the storm. The cockpit rattled under the force of turbulence. Rain lashed against the canopy. Lightning flashed so close she could feel the electric pulse through her gloves. Below, the SEALs were in position somewhere in the chaos. Her voice came through the comms, calm and even. "Hawkeye, this is Reaper 1. I'm on station, awaiting coordinates." Static hissed, then a low voice broke through. "Reaper 1, this is Captain Hall. Good to finally have you up there." She smiled faintly. "Glad to be of service, sir." For the next 40 minutes, she guided the SEALs through hostile zones, marking potential ambushes with precision strikes. Her instincts were razor-sharp, her composure absolute. Hawley quickly realized she wasn't just a pilot, she was a lifeline. But the storm worsened. A downdraft slammed into her jet, forcing it into a sudden drop. Alarms blared. She corrected immediately, her breathing steady, her mind calculating escape vectors faster than fear could set in. "Reaper 1, you still with us?" Hale's voice cut through the static. "Still here, Captain. she replied. "You've got movement east of your position. I'll light it up." Seconds later, her ordnance hit dead center. Hale's men advanced safely through the clearing smoke. The exercise supposed to test coordination ended up proving something far greater: trust. When she landed, soaked in sweat and exhaustion, Hale was waiting on the deck. He didn't salute, didn't speak right away. He just looked at her with the kind of recognition only soldiers understood. "You kept my men alive out there," he finally said. Emily shrugged slightly. "Just doing my job, sir." Hale gave a short nod. "You did it damn well." After that night, things changed. Word spread across the carrier about the pilot who had flown through a storm and saved a SEAL team mid-simulation. Some still whispered, "She got lucky." But most had stopped doubting her altogether. Even the old Commander Douglas had begun referring to her as Lieutenant Carter instead of the girl pilot. Hale, meanwhile, became a quiet supporter. Though they rarely interacted, there was mutual respect between them. Once, during a joint briefing, Hale said to his men, "If you ever see Reaper 1 in the sky, you know you're not dying today." Emily pretended not to hear, but inside, it meant everything. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sea in hues of gold and crimson, Emily stood alone on the deck. She thought about how far she'd come, from the small-town girl sketching airplanes to a combat pilot trusted by Navy SEALs. Reeves joined her, coffee mug in hand. "Not bad for a rookie," he said. She smiled. "You almost sound proud." He smirked. "Almost." They watched jets take off into the setting sun, and Reeves added quietly, "You've got a rare gift, Carter. You stay calm when the sky loses its mind. Keep that. It's what'll keep you alive." That night, in her quarters, Emily wrote in her logbook, "The ocean tests patience. The sky tests courage. People test both. But calm isn't weakness. It's power under control." Outside, thunder rumbled far off the coast. She looked out the window toward the dark horizon. Somewhere out there, real battles were waiting, not simulations, not drills, but the kind of missions where every decision meant life or death. And when that call came, she knew one thing with absolute certainty: she would answer it without fear. Because Emily Carter had earned her place, not by shouting louder or fighting harder, but by mastering the one thing the sky demanded most: calm. The carrier hummed with quiet tension that morning. The air itself seemed even thicker, charged with something more than the usual hum of engines and salt wind. Word had spread. A real combat deployment was coming. No simulation, no drill this time. For weeks, intelligence reports had hinted at growing instability in a remote, coastal region where American reconnaissance drones had gone silent. Now, the USS Ronald Reagan's Air Wing had received the order: prepare for an extraction and possible hostile engagement. In the ready room, the air crew gathered rows of uniforms, boots polished, helmets on the tables before them. The mood was electric but solemn. No one cracked jokes this time. At the front stood Captain Ryan Hale, the Navy SEAL commander, whose name carried weight like thunder. His gaze swept over the pilot steady, assessing like a man searching for something specific. Emily Carter sat in the third row, her posture straight, eyes forward, heart steady. Hale began, his tone calm but commanding. "Intel confirms a downed CIA operative behind enemy lines. Location: a mountainous region outside the coast of Baluchistan. He's injured, surrounded, and time's running out." The room stilled. Everyone knew what that meant: enemy-controlled territory, unpredictable weather, and anti-air defenses. A nightmare mission for any pilot. Hale continued, "We need air support fast, accurate, and fearless. Someone who can think under pressure. Someone who can stay calm when things go wrong. Then his words hung in the air like a challenge. Any combat pilots here who can handle that? The silence that followed felt endless. Eyes darted. Men shifted in their seats. No one spoke. Then, quietly without hesitation, Lieutenant Emily Carter stood up. The movement drew every gaze in the room. The only sound was the faint whir of ceiling fans. Halle turned toward her, one brow raised. She met his eyes with the same composure she'd held in every storm, every takeoff, every close call. "Lieutenant Emily Carter, sir," she said firmly. "Combat certified, Super Hornet pilot. I can handle it." For a moment, Halle simply studied her. His expression didn't betray surprise, but curiosity flickered behind his steady blue eyes. "You?" he said quietly, not mocking, just measuring. "Yes, sir," she replied. "Permission to brief the flight plan?" The faintest hint of a smile touched his lips. "Go ahead, Lieutenant." She walked to the digital map at the front, her boots echoing softly on the metal floor. The pilots watched her, half expecting nerves or hesitation. But Emily spoke with the confidence of a veteran twice her age. "We enter low below radar sweep. Terrain masking through the southern ridge. The extraction point's too tight for a full airstrike, but I can provide precision fire from altitude. If needed, I'll draw heat away from your insertion vector." She tapped the map twice, her voice firm. "Timing's everything. You'll have a 7-minute window before enemy drones recalibrate. I'll stay overhead until you're clear." When she finished, the room was silent again, only this time it wasn't disbelief holding it. It was respect. Hale's gaze didn't waver. "You've done this before?" "Not in this region," Emily said evenly. "But I've flown worse storms." A flicker of recognition crossed Hale's face. He remembered her from that night. The storm drill. The voice over the radio that had kept his men alive. "You're Reaper 1, he said quietly. She nodded once. "Yes, sir." That settled it. Halle looked at the operations officer. "She flies lead." Hours later, preparations were underway. The deck bustled with mechanics, loaders, and crew shouting over the roar of engines. Emily's FA-18 Super Hornet stood gleaming under the deck lights, fully armed and fueled. Reeves walked up beside her, helmet under his arm. "You sure about this, Carter? This isn't a drill." She gave him a sideways glance. "You sound worried." "I'm not worried. Just," he hesitated. "Proud, maybe?" She smiled faintly. "That's new." "Don't get used to it," he muttered, walking away with a grin. Moments before launch, Halle approached her. His face was calm, but his eyes carried the unspoken weight of command. "You don't have to prove anything up there," he said. "Just bring them home." Emily adjusted her gloves. "That's always the plan, sir." He nodded. "See you on the other side, Lieutenant." With that, he disappeared toward the hangar bay where his team awaited deployment. When the catapult fired, the Super Hornet screamed off the deck like a living thing. The sea blurred below as Emily pulled up into the sky, banking sharply toward the target zone. The mission had begun. At 32,000 feet, she checked her instruments, fuel steady, weapons armed, comms clear. The night stretched before her, vast and indifferent. Below, a black wilderness waited. "Reaper 1, this is Ghost Team. We're 5 clicks from drop zone." Hale's voice came through the headset. "Copy that, Ghost? You're clear for descent. I'll keep the skies clean." Her hands moved with surgical precision, adjusting flaps, toggling radar filters. Her calm voice belied the danger. Minutes later, her radar pinged hostile movement approaching from the west. She zoomed in. Enemy trucks with mounted guns were closing on the extraction point. "Ghost, you've got company inbound, 45 degrees west." "Acknowledged," Halle replied. Can you soften them up? Affirmative. Emily's jet dropped altitude, slicing through the night like a blade. She lined up the coordinates, locked onto the convoy, and released her payload. 2 perfect detonations bloomed across the dark terrain. Flames flared, then vanished as the dust settled. Targets neutralized, she said calmly. Beautiful work, Hawley responded, awe in his voice. Then the unexpected happened. A hidden anti-air battery lit up on the Ridge 3 missiles, launched almost simultaneously. Emily's warning alarm shrieked. She dove hard left, flares firing, the world spinning in a blur of light and sound. 1 missile missed. The second exploded too early. The third still locked on. Her mind worked faster than instinct. She rolled inverted, pulled down toward the canyon below, and used the mountain itself as cover. The missile followed, then detonated harmlessly against the rock wall. The G-force crushed her into the seat, but she didn't flinch. Reaper 1, report. Hale's voice barked through static. Still flying, she answered, breath steady. You've got 2 minutes before company returns. Move fast. Hale's team reached the extraction zone, securing the operative amid sporadic fire. Emily's jet roared overhead, strafing enemy positions with perfect accuracy. Her fuel levels were dangerously low, but she didn't leave until the SEALs were airborne and clear. Ghost team is clear, Hale confirmed. Heading to rendezvous. Copy, Ghost. I'll see you home. As she turned toward the open sea, the dawn began to break faint orange streaks lighting the clouds. She allowed herself 1 deep breath, feeling the exhaustion settle into her bones. For a few seconds, she closed her eyes and smiled. Not out of pride, but peace. Back on the carrier, when her jet's wheels kissed the deck, the crew erupted in cheers. It wasn't just another successful mission, it was her mission. Captain Hawley waited at the edge of the deck, arms folded, wind whipping through his hair. When she climbed down from the cockpit, helmet under her arm, he walked toward her slowly. You fly like you've got ice in your veins, he said quietly. Calm, she replied simply. That's what you asked for, right? He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. You're the real thing, Lieutenant. As she walked past him toward the hangar, the morning sun broke through the clouds, washing the deck in light. For the first time, everyone on board the men who had doubted her, the ones who'd watched silently, knew exactly who Emily Carter was. Not just a pilot, not just a woman in a man's world, but a warrior who stayed calm when the sky caught fire. The carrier was quieter now. Days had passed since the mission, since Emily Carter had flown into the storm of gunfire and pulled the SEALs out alive. The sea around the USS Ronald Reagan had settled into a glassy calm, but inside the ship, a different kind of turbulence brewed. For Emily, the sound of the engines and the hum of the deck had become familiar, almost comforting. But this time, when she walked the passageways, people didn't just glance at her. They saluted, nodded, whispered her name with respect instead of skepticism. Reaper 1. The call sign that once sounded like a challenge now carried weight. And yet, the victory didn't feel simple. In the aftermath of every mission, there were debriefs, reports, politics, and consequences. The extraction she had led had been a success, yes, but it had also drawn international attention. The region was now flaring with diplomatic tension, and Washington wanted answers. Emily sat across from Commander Douglas in the briefing room, a place she had come to associate with pressure and precision. His once gruff tone was now quieter, but the edge remained. You went off mission protocol, he said, scanning her report. You dropped below approved altitude. I did what the mission required, sir, Emily replied evenly. You risked your aircraft. I saved 6 men. The words hung between them like steel. Douglas sighed. He leaned back, folding his hands. You realize this will reach the higher-ups, Command doesn't like deviations. Emily met his eyes. Then they shouldn't send people into combat if they don't want decisions made. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, surprisingly, he gave a faint smile. You remind me of someone I used to be. That was the closest thing to a compliment she would ever get from him. Later that afternoon, as the carrier cut through the Pacific, Emily stood on the flight deck, her helmet tucked under her arm. The sea stretched endlessly vast, powerful, indifferent. She heard footsteps behind her. Without looking, she said, You walk too heavily to be a deckhand, Captain. Ryan Halley chuckled softly. So now you're profiling my footsteps? She turned, smiling faintly. Just an observation. He joined her at the railing, the wind catching his uniform. For a while, neither spoke. The silence wasn't awkward. It was the kind of silence shared by people who had faced death together and walked away from it. You saved my team, he said finally. All of them. You know that, right? I did my job, she said, her tone calm as ever. He looked at her, his expression unreadable. You did more than that. You stayed when every other pilot would have turned back. Emily didn't answer. Compliments never sat easily with her. But her eyes softened. They were still on the ground, she said simply. That's not something you leave behind. Halley nodded slowly. You'd have made a hell of a SEAL. Too loud for the water, she said with a small smile. He laughed quietly, a deep, genuine sound that surprised her. You might be right about that. But beneath the camaraderie, there was unease. Halley had been summoned for a video briefing with Joint Command that evening. So had Emily. That meant something was brewing above their pay grade. When she walked into the communications room later, the air was cold and formal. The massive screen flickered to life, revealing a panel of uniformed officers from Washington. The admiral at the center leaned forward. Lieutenant Carter, he said, his tone clipped. You led a mission that violated altitude restrictions and triggered radar signatures in a no-fly corridor. Yes, sir, she said calmly. You are aware that could have compromised national intelligence assets? Yes, sir. And yet you proceeded? Yes, sir. A pause. Why? Emily didn't flinch. Because, Captain, Hale's team would have died if I hadn't. I had a choice between following a line on a map or saving American lives. I made my choice. The Admiral's expression didn't change, but one of the other officers shifted uncomfortably. Halley, standing beside her, remained silent, but his eyes said everything. After a long pause, the Admiral nodded once. Noted. Lieutenant Carter, you're officially cleared of misconduct. The President has requested a classified commendation for valor. You'll receive it upon return. Emily blinked, caught off guard. Sir? The Admiral allowed a faint smile. You made the right choice, Lieutenant. Even if it scared the hell out of the Pentagon. The screen went dark. When it did, Halley exhaled slowly. Remind me never to be on your bad side. She chuckled. You'd be fine. You stay calm under fire. So do you, he said softly. But you do it with more grace than most men I've met. Emily looked away, her jaw tightening. Calm's all I've got, Captain. Without it, the sky wins. Days turned into weeks. The mission debriefs faded. The medals were awarded in quiet ceremonies, no press, no speeches, just handshakes and sealed reports. But the event had changed Emily's place aboard the carrier forever. Pilots who once avoided her now asked for her input on mission planning. Even Commander Douglas occasionally sought her tactical advice. The crew had started calling her the calm in the storm. Still, inside her, something deeper stirred. It wasn't pride. It was an awareness that combat didn't end when the jet landed. It lingered in the silence afterward, in the weight of decisions that couldn't be undone. Sometimes, late at night, she replayed the moment the missiles came for her. The sound of the alarms, the rush of instinct, the crushing G-force. And in those moments, she realized something terrifying. She had never been afraid. Not once. That frightened her more than anything. One evening, Holly found her again on the observation deck, watching the horizon. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "Just thinking," she replied. "About the mission? About what comes after?" He leaned against the rail beside her. "What does come after?" "I don't know," she said quietly. "Maybe the next mission. Maybe nothing. People like us, we don't really stop, do we?" He nodded. "No, we just get better at pretending we're fine." For a long while, they watched the waves crash against the hull below. Then Hale spoke, his voice low but sincere. "You know, the first time I asked that question, any combat pilots? I didn't expect someone like you to stand up." "Someone like me?" she asked. "A woman who doesn't talk big, doesn't posture, just does the job." Emily smiled faintly. "Guess I've made a career out of surprising people." He chuckled. "Keep doing that. The Navy could use more surprises." The following morning brought a new assignment, a classified redeployment. Emily's squadron would be temporarily reassigned to a NATO base in southern Europe. New skies. New allies. As she packed her gear, she found a small envelope tucked into her locker. Inside was a folded note, written in tight, neat handwriting. "For what it's worth, you changed more than the mission. You changed what we believe is possible. RH asterisk." She read it twice, then tucked it into her flight journal. No signature needed. That night, before takeoff, the deck was bathed in moonlight. The ocean gleamed like liquid silver as her jet taxied into position. Her headset crackled to life with Hale's familiar voice from the command channel. "Reaper 1, you're cleared for departure." "Safe skies, Lieutenant." "Copy that, Ghost Leader," she replied, smiling slightly. "Try not to miss me too much." "Not a chance," he said, but his tone said otherwise. The catapult launched her jet into the night, the stars unfolding before her like an endless promise. Emily Carter didn't look back, because people who lived between earth and sky didn't need to. The horizon was always ahead. The airbase in southern Italy was a world away from the steel decks of the USS Ronald Reagan. No ocean spray, no rolling horizon, just the smell of hot asphalt, olive trees in the distance, and the constant roar of fighter jets tearing through Mediterranean skies. Lieutenant Emily Carter stepped off the transport plane with her flight helmet under her arm, squinting against the glare. She'd been reassigned to NATO Command Wing 42, a multinational task force based near Naples. Her orders were simple: assist in joint air exercises with European allies, focusing on high-risk interception drills. But nothing about it felt simple. She was walking into a base of strangers, men and women from 7 countries, each with their own rules, hierarchies, and egos. And from the moment she arrived, she could feel the weight of their eyes. Not hostility, just curiosity and skepticism. "American pilot?" The voice came from behind her, thick with a German accent. Emily turned to see a tall man in a flight suit, his blonde hair cropped close and a faint smirk playing on his lips. His name tag read LT, Marcus Keller, Luftwaffe. "Lieutenant Carter," she replied, offering a handshake. He looked at it for a beat before shaking. "Keller, heard about you. The one they call Reaper 1, yes?" She nodded, cautious. "I didn't choose the name. Names like that, they usually come with stories." "Usually," she said evenly, brushing past him. As she walked toward the hangar, Keller called after her. "We'll see if the stories are true." Inside the hangar, she found her aircraft, a sleek F/A-18 Super Hornet, modified for NATO integration. Technicians moved around it like ants, running diagnostics, and loading simulation systems. Commander Lucia Romano, the Italian mission lead, greeted her with a crisp salute. Romano was sharp, efficient, and Emily immediately noticed, one of the few other women in command here. "Lieutenant Carter," Romano said warmly, "welcome to Wing 42. We've heard good things." "Appreciate it, ma'am." Romano smiled faintly. "You'll find things a bit different here. We don't care where you're from only if you can fly." "I can fly," Emily said simply. Romano's smile widened. "Then you'll fit in fine." The first week was a whirlwind of briefings, check flights, and simulations. The exercises were meant to test coordination between multiple nations' complex airspace, shared communication codes, and tactical adaptability. Emily's squadron was paired with Keller's. He was skilled, no denying that, but reckless. Where Emily relied on calculation, Keller thrived on speed and flair. During one exercise, Keller broke formation mid-flight to chase a simulated target, nearly causing a mid-air collision. "Wing Control, this is Reaper 1. Emily's calm voice came through the radio. "We've got a deviation. Keller's out of pattern." Keller's voice followed, laughing. "Relax, Reaper. Just making it interesting." Her tone remained steady. "Interesting gets people killed." When they landed, Keller sauntered over, pulling off his helmet. "You fly like a computer," he teased. Precise, predictable. Emily met his eyes. "And alive." That shut him up for now. One night after debrief, Emily sat alone in the base cafeteria, reading flight notes. Outside, thunder rumbled faintly over the mountains. The Mediterranean storms came without warning here. Short, violent bursts that reminded her of home. A familiar voice broke the quiet. "You know, you don't have to prove anything to anyone." She looked up to see Captain Ryan High, freshly arrived in Italy. Her surprise flickered across her face before she masked it. "Didn't expect to see you here. Joint Operations Liaison," he said with a small grin. "Command figured I'd keep an eye on you." "Or report on me," she said dryly. "Maybe both," he admitted, sitting across from her. For a moment, they were silent. The last time they'd seen each other, it had been after that storm of fire when calm had meant survival. Halle studied her face. "How are you, really?" "Fine," she said automatically. He leaned forward. "You've got that same look I've seen in combat medics. The one that says, 'I'm fine because I have to be.'" Emily exhaled softly. "If I stop being fine, Captain, everything else stops with me." Halle nodded. "Fair enough. Just don't lose yourself in the calm. There's a difference between control and silence." She didn't answer, but the words stayed with her long after he left. The next morning, a mission alert came in. Not an exercise. Not a simulation. Real-world intercept. 2 unidentified aircraft had breached NATO airspace over the Adriatic. No flight plans, no transponders. "Scramble order, immediate." Romano's voice crackled over the intercom. "Reaper 1, Hawk 2, you're on intercept duty." Emily and Keller sprinted to the flight line. Within minutes, their jets were roaring into the bright Italian sky. "Control, this is Reaper 1. Climbing to 25,000 feet, heading 112 degrees. Hawk 2 copies," Keller added. "Let's see who decided to visit uninvited." As they closed in, radar confirmed 2 fast-moving contacts, unknown models, military profile. Emily's pulse steadied. "Maintain formation," she ordered. "Copy," Keller replied, though his tone carried a hint of impatience. The contacts began to split one, turning sharply toward the coast. "Keller, stay on your mark," she warned. "I've got the lead one," he replied. "You take the other." "Keller." He broke formation. Alarms flared in her cockpit. The unknown aircraft wasn't just fast, it was hostile. It locked radar onto Keller's position. Evasive maneuvers now. She barked. But Keller's delayed reaction cost him precious seconds. The enemy jet fired an infrared-guided missile, streaking through the sky. Without thinking, Emily dove toward him, releasing countermeasures. Flares burst around her, dazzling arcs of light across the blue. She angled her jet between Keller and the incoming missile, timing it down to the millisecond. The explosion rocked the sky. The shockwave sent both jets spinning. Her alarms blared. Her oxygen gauge flickered. Her right stabilizer was gone. Reaper 1, Mayday. Are you hit? Keller's panicked voice crackled through. I'm fine, she lied, steadying her breath. Regroup and head west. I'll draw them off. No. You can't. That's an order, Lieutenant. She banked hard, climbing into the sun. The second hostile followed her, radar lock pinging. She stayed silent, her mind cool, detached. Every movement was math and instinct, no fear, no noise. At 40,000 feet, she flipped her jet, dropped behind her pursuer, and fired. One missile. One heartbeat. Target vaporized. Her damaged Hornet trembled as she turned back toward base. When she landed, emergency crews rushed to her plane. The fuselage was scorched, one wing shredded. She climbed out slowly, her flight suit torn but her expression unshaken. Keller ran up, breathless. You took that hit for me. She looked at him calmly. I took it for the mission. He swallowed hard. I could have. You didn't, she said quietly. Next time, listen. Hawley appeared beside them, eyes sharp with a mixture of anger and admiration. Hell of a show up there, he said. You saved his life. Lucky shot, she replied. Not luck, he said firmly. Instinct. Romano approached, her expression unreadable. Lieutenant Carter, you'll be debriefed by command tomorrow. For now, rest. Emily nodded. Understood, ma'am. As Romano turned to leave, she paused. You were right, by the way. About what? Calm isn't weakness, she said. It's survival. That night, Emily sat alone in her bunk, replaying the mission. The sound of the missile. The split-second decision. Keller's voice, trembling over the radio. For the first time, she let her hands shake. Not from fear, but from everything she'd been holding in. She opened her journal and wrote, The closer you fly to the edge, the clearer everything becomes. Fear, pride, survival, they all fall away. What's left is the choice. And every choice costs something. Outside, lightning cracked across the Mediterranean sky. Emily watched it silently, the flash reflected in her eyes. Tomorrow, there would be another mission, another test. But tonight, she allowed herself to feel, just for a moment, what it meant to be human again. The Mediterranean sun rose over NATO Air Base 42, casting long shadows across the tarmac. Emily Carter's Hornet was already prepped for the morning sortie, its sleek body gleaming like polished obsidian. Yet the quiet of dawn felt heavy. News of her last mission had spread quickly through NATO command channels. Some hailed her as a hero. Others, bureaucrats, politicians, and conservative pilots, alike questioned her judgment. She had gone off protocol. She had saved lives. But at what cost? Emily didn't read the reports. She didn't need to. Her superiors, Hawley and a handful of trusted allies, knew the truth. She had done exactly what was necessary. But whispers were like shadows. They crept even through the strongest armor. Her first briefing that morning was a tense affair. A panel of NATO officers, some European, some American, had gathered to discuss the recent breach incident and the missile engagement. The tone was clipped, formal, and accusatory in subtle ways. An older officer, Colonel Philippe Moreau of the French Air Force leaned forward. "Lieutenant Carter, you engaged hostile aircraft outside of NATO's established interception zone. You could have provoked an international incident." Emily's eyes remained calm. "Colonel, the aircraft were unmarked and actively targeting my wingman. Engagement was necessary to protect Allied lives. Any delay could have resulted in casualties." A German officer muttered something under his breath about reckless Americans. Emily ignored it. She had learned long ago that words without consequences were irrelevant. Halle, standing beside her, gave a quiet nod. "She's right," he said. His tone carried the weight of a man who had lost men under his command. He only spoke when it mattered. The panel fell silent. After the briefing, Emily walked alone to the edge of the airfield, helmet tucked under her arm. The smell of hot asphalt and jet fuel filled her lungs. She could hear the distant roar of hornets practicing maneuvers. Her thoughts turned inward. Combat wasn't just a test of skill, it was a test of control. And now, the political fallout threatened to unravel everything she had learned about calm under pressure. A voice broke through the silence. "Emily." She turned to see Captain Ryan Halle, his silhouette sharp against the morning sky. "They'll come around," he said quietly. "People always do when the smoke clears." "I hope," she said, voice soft. "I don't need recognition. I just need to know the decisions I make won't cost lives unnecessarily." Hale's gaze was steady. "Then keep making them. The rest is noise." Later that day, she was called to a joint NATO exercise over the Adriatic Sea, a full-scale interception simulation with live tracking. Emily flew as lead for the American squadron. Keller was once again her wingman, a little less reckless now after the near miss. The scenario was brutal. Multiple targets approaching from different vectors, electronic interference, and sudden simulated radar jamming. Emily's voice came over the comms. "Maintain formation. Adjust altitude 500 feet. Vectors 110 to 135. Watch for crossfire." The others followed her lead with precision. Emily's calmness was contagious, her instructions deliberate and steady. Even Keller, who had teased her about being like a computer, now mirrored her movements, trusting her decisions implicitly. The exercise lasted nearly 3 hours, and by the end, NATO observers were silent for a moment, then erupted in quiet approval. Romano's voice came over the comms. "Excellent work, Carter. NATO flight efficiency highest in years." Emily exhaled quietly, letting the tension drain from her shoulders. But the real challenge came that evening. A classified message had arrived from European command. A suspected hostile submarine was operating near NATO shipping lanes. Civilians were at risk. Emily and her squadron were tasked with reconnaissance and potential engagement. Halle briefed her personally. "Emily, this is delicate. You may have to make split-second decisions that will be scrutinized at the highest level. Rules of engagement are strict, but time is critical." She nodded. "Understood, sir. I'll act within mission parameters and outside them if lives are in immediate danger." Hale's eyes softened. "I trust you. Just don't lose yourself in the calm." The mission began at dusk. Emily climbed to altitude in her Hornet, instruments humming softly. Below, the Adriatic was calm, deceptive. Radar showed an anomaly slow-moving, deep in the waters near shipping lanes. "Target acquired," she reported. "Engaging observation pattern." As she circled, she noted 2 small fast boats approaching the suspected location potential hostile recon. The situation escalated quickly. "Control, unknown contacts closing in. Recommend warning shots," Emily said, calm as ever. Command approved. She fired tracer rounds, a warning. The boats altered course, but one maintained trajectory toward civilian shipping. Emily's decision had to be immediate. She calculated trajectory, wind, and distance. In one seamless motion, she deployed a precision-guided missile to disable the boat without causing collateral damage. The result was perfect. The hostile craft was neutralized. Civilians remained safe. Back on base, the debrief was tense. Moreau's voice cut sharply. "Lieutenant Carter, you acted decisively, but dangerously. An ATO can't condone actions taken outside command approval, even if they prevent civilian casualties." Emily met his gaze evenly. "Colonel, my actions saved lives. Rules of engagement are guidelines, not barriers to preventing human loss. If I hesitate, someone dies. My squadron trusts me to make those choices." Hawley stepped forward, his tone low and commanding. "Colonel, Lieutenant Carter doesn't make mistakes in judgment. Her calm under pressure is unparalleled. We cannot penalize life-saving decisions." There was silence. Finally, Moreau nodded reluctantly. "We will review, but your record speaks for itself." That night, Emily sat on the observation deck, looking over the endless sea. Her flight had been successful. Civilians safe. Allies impressed. Yet she felt the weight of what she had done. Haile joined her silently. "You're carrying a lot," he said. "I have to," she replied. "If I don't, I risk everything. The calm isn't just for me, it's for everyone relying on me." He nodded. "And that's exactly why you're extraordinary. But don't forget humans break. Even the calmest." Emily looked out at the horizon, the moonlight reflecting on the waves. She knew he was right. Calm was a weapon, but it required constant vigilance, and even the strongest could falter. She whispered to herself, almost as a warning, "The sky will test me again. And next time, I can't just survive. I have to be ready to lead when everything falls apart." The following morning, NATO's highest command requested her presence via secure communication. Her actions were being reviewed for potential distinguished valor citation, rare recognition across multiple allied nations. As she prepared for the call, Emily adjusted her flight jacket, took a deep breath, and centered herself. Calm, as always. Because for Emily Carter, calm wasn't just survival. It was responsibility. It was courage. It was the defining difference between fear and action. The calm had carried her this far, and she wasn't about to let it fail now. The Mediterranean dawn was sharp and electric. Emily Carter stood on the tarmac, helmet under her arm, staring at the line of Hornets ready for takeoff. Today's mission wasn't a drill. Intelligence reported multiple hostile drones entering NATO-controlled airspace, armed and targeting civilian shipping routes. The potential for disaster was real. Her squadron looked to her for leadership pilots from 4 nations, some skeptical of the young American, others already trusting her instinct. She exhaled, centering herself. Calm had carried her this far. It would carry her again. Reaper 1. All systems green. "Ready for command," came Keller's voice in the comms. Emily adjusted her helmet, voice steady and precise. "Copy, Hawk 2. All wings follow my lead. Maintain altitude 22,000 feet. Approach vector 075. Engage only if hostile maneuvers are confirmed." Even as she spoke, the radar screens lit up, multiple fast-moving targets scattered across a 30-mile corridor. The challenge was clear. Intercept and neutralize without collateral damage, under the pressure of international scrutiny. The squadron launched, engines roaring like a thunderclap over the Adriatic. Emily's jet catapulted off the deck, slicing through the sky. She felt the familiar rush the adrenaline, but kept it controlled. This wasn't about thrill. It was precision, judgment, and survival. "Keller, left flank," she commanded. "Romano, take right. Maintain formation tight." eyes on targets. The drones reacted, their flight patterns erratic. Emily calculated trajectories, factoring wind, altitude, and potential civilian traffic. She released a pair of precision-guided missiles. One drone exploded in a controlled detonation. The other went down with minimal debris. Targets neutralized, she reported calmly. But the radar pinged again. 3 more drones appeared, faster and more unpredictable. "Brace," Emily whispered to herself. She dove, flipping her jet into an aggressive pursuit. The sea blurred below, waves catching the morning light. Keller followed closely, his earlier recklessness tempered by her example. Emily's calmness became the anchor for the entire squadron. Every decision she made, every maneuver, every target lock was deliberate, precise, and communicated clearly. As the drones dispersed toward a civilian shipping route, she executed a daring maneuver. A low-level intercept over the water, using her jet's speed to herd the drones away from the path of a cruise liner. "Ghost team." Hale's voice came over secure comms, tension underlying his calm. "You're performing beautifully. Keep it tight." Emily responded without hesitation. "Copy, Captain." Covering civilian corridor. All units remained coordinated. Within minutes, all hostile targets were neutralized. The mission was a success. When the squadron returned to base, the atmosphere was electric. Ground crews cheered, foreign pilots clapped, and even skeptics who had doubted her before offered nods of respect. Emily stepped down from her jet, exhausted but composed. Her eyes swept over the crew and pilots. Every life saved today was a testament to calm under pressure or calm. Hale approached, expression unreadable. "You've done more than fly today. You led, protected, and inspired. That's why you're exceptional." Emily's response was simple. "We all did our part, sir. I just stayed focused." He shook his head. "That's what makes it remarkable. Not just survival, but leadership under fire." Later, in the briefing room, NATO's highest command gathered to recognize the mission's success. Emily stood before a panel of generals, admirals, and allied officers. The room was formal, stiff, and tense, yet she radiated the same calm that had carried her through storms, missiles, and hostile skies. "Lieutenant Carter," began Admiral Jensen of NATO, "your actions have prevented loss of civilian life, maintained Allied coordination, and demonstrated exceptional leadership in high-stakes operations. You are hereby awarded the NATO Cross of Valor in recognition of outstanding service under extreme conditions." Emily's face remained calm, expression neutral, as she accepted the award. Inside, however, pride bloomed quietly, a private acknowledgement of everything she had endured, every decision made under pressure. Hale watched from the side, his eyes reflecting approval and respect. "Well earned," he murmured. After the ceremony, Emily returned to the airfield. Keller approached, slightly hesitant. "You really are Reaper One," he said, a tone of awe in his voice. She smiled faintly. "Only because I've learned to stay calm when everything wants to burn around me." He nodded slowly. "I think I've learned more from you than any instructor." Romano joined them, placing a hand on Emily's shoulder. "Your calm is your gift. It saved lives today. Remember that." Emily nodded, feeling the weight of the words. Calm wasn't just survival. It was influence, trust, and responsibility. That evening, Emily stood once again on the observation deck, the Mediterranean wind blowing through her hair. The horizon glowed with the colors of dusk, vast and infinite. Hale joined her quietly, standing a respectful distance away. "You've changed more than this base," he said softly. "You've changed how we see leadership." Emily looked out over the sea, reflecting. "I didn't want to be a symbol," she said. "I just wanted to do my job, but I suppose sometimes Doing the job well is enough to inspire. Halle nodded. It is. You've shown that courage isn't loud or flashy. It's calm in the eye of the storm, decision when it matters most, and unwavering focus when everyone else is panicking. Emily smiled faintly, letting the wind carry away the tension she had held for weeks. Then I'll keep flying, she said. And when the sky tests me again, I'll remain calm. That's the only way to lead, to survive, and to protect. The weeks that followed cemented her reputation. Pilots from multiple NATO countries requested mentorship from her. Her strategies were incorporated into joint exercises. Even bureaucrats who had questioned her methods came to acknowledge that her instinctive calm, her ability to think and act under pressure, was invaluable. Emily never sought recognition. She preferred the sky, the flight deck, and the quiet moments of reflection above the world. But her influence grew silently, like the shadow of a rising sun. In private letters, Halle wrote, "You don't just survive the sky. You teach it respect. Calm is your power. Don't ever forget that." Emily kept the letter in her flight journal. It was a reminder that calm was not weakness, it was mastery. One night, months later, she flew alone over the Mediterranean. The moon was high, the water below black and shimmering. She felt the rhythm of the jet beneath her, the hum of engines, the vast sky around her. Every mission, every crisis, every tense moment had led to this. Perfect stillness in motion, clarity in chaos, trust in instinct. Emily Carter's journey from the USS Ronald Reagan, through storms, missiles, and the eyes of doubting allies, culminated in that single moment of flight. The world below was complex, dangerous, unpredictable. But up here, she was the calm at the center of it all. She whispered to herself, a quiet vow and promise. The sky may test me, the storms may roar, but calm will always guide me. Always. And with that, Emily pulled back on the stick, accelerating into the night, leaving behind her a legacy of courage, precision, and unwavering calm. Because heroes aren't defined by noise, medals, or recognition. They are defined by the calm that holds everything together when the world wants to fall apart. The sky stretched endlessly before her, and Emily Carter Reaper 1 was ready for whatever came next.